You're listening to the Spirited Entrepreneur Podcast, a show that's dedicated to cultivating intention, awareness, and flow in business and life. Join your host, Nicole Harlow, and other like-minded business owners in the Spirited Entrepreneur community over at www.thesepodreview.com.
I saw the sun.
Hi, and welcome to the Spirited Entrepreneur Podcast. This is your host, Nicole Harlow, and welcome to today's show. We are going to be diving pretty deep in this episode down into the topic of understanding and uncovering your why. The big why behind your business, behind why it is that you do what you do. I wish I could say that when I started out my businesses years ago, I wish I could say that I had started from a place of uncovering my why or really deeply understanding my why. My why for creating things, my why for just actually wanting to be an entrepreneur. I can't really say that I started from that place. As I look back, I see that I started from a place of feeling quite unemployable. And what I mean by that is I had a hard time, for most of my life, I've had a hard time of keeping a job for longer than, say, 6 months. A year was definitely a stretch for me. 18 months was certain that I was ready couldn't wait to be gone. I seem to have been on the cycle of like 6 months to 18 months, somewhere within there, of lacking consistency and feeling like I was ready to just move on to a different job, or the same pattern has really been something very profound in my life. In my adult life, is that every 6 months to 18 months within that window, I'm ready to move somewhere else. So I've spent most of my adult life moving from place to place, different country to different country, living in America, England, Greece, back to America, back to England, now in Malta. And traveling within that time period too. And that's always just been quite a profound pattern for me, is this 6 month to 18 month window that I knew that I would start to get itchy feet, and I would start to feel quite uncomfortable and ready to move into something different. And I think that that's probably one of the main drivers that did initially push me into entrepreneurship, was not feeling very employable and not feeling particularly driven in any way, shape, or form to work for a boss. So with that spirit, I did start my own company, and I think that the very first thing that I did was creating, making cards and journals and earrings, so kind of like handicrafts, and I was supplementing my waitressing income, so I was doing like a waitressing job at night, and then I was selling arts and crafts at craft fairs. And to be honest, I was really bad at it. I was not very technically adept at what I was creating, and it's not surprising that I didn't really sell anything, so I had a little Etsy shop, and I had a blog, like an arts and craft blog that I was trying to sort of get some sales from, and I made a little bit of money, but not anything that could make me quit my other job. And that's around the time that I started, I got my yoga teacher training certification, and I started teaching yoga. I also started, that's when I started my burlesque studio and started teaching burlesque classes for female self-empowerment and sexuality, because my degree is in sexuality studies, my master's degree. And I loved the combination of bringing women together in a space like that. It was so empowering to bring a group of women together so we could start talking about our relationships to our bodies, to ourselves. We would sit in a circle and talk about, what we find sexy about ourselves or what we find sexy in someone else. And then we would dance. So that was really brilliant. And it allowed me the opportunity to start what I would consider my first proper business, where I was the owner and there were decisions to make, and there were just even the littler things in business, like making a website. It was cool because this was when all the social media was really kicking off. So I started out in business by printing out flyers and just posting them around the neighborhood and printing out postcards. And so I was able to transition in business from offline to online, and creating my first social media profile for my first business was a Facebook profile, not even a Facebook business page or anything like that. So Twitter wasn't around, no Instagram, nothing like that. So a Facebook profile page was the very first thing that I ever did for social media in business. So it's been a really cool experience of being a business owner and moving through all of these layers, these technological layers that have unfolded throughout the years, and see the way that I do business now is profoundly different than how I was doing it even just 8 or 9 years ago. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got started out, how I cut my teeth in business, and through various twists and turns of fate, I added several more business opportunities as the years went on, and spent a good chunk of the last 5 years as a writer, a freelance writer for health and wellness publications, yoga publications, and nutrition, and wrote a book, which is an Amazon bestseller. And that in a very roundabout way led me to what I do now, which is web design, branding. I teach branding, and I do some branding coaching, some one-on-one coaching, and also having this podcast. And I like to be, teaching. I like teaching webinars and other entrepreneurial tasks. And the writing is still very much a part of this, because whether it's a webinar or a podcast or a video or a course, for me, it comes back down to the words. I think that the words are so powerful in shaping everything that it is that I do. But it can sometimes be quite overwhelming, and I think a lot of business owners that have their fingers in lots of different pies, like me, or have had their fingers in lots of different pies over the years, it can be kind of daunting and overwhelming to explain to someone what it is that you do and what it is that your history is, because for most entrepreneurs that I know, it's not a linear experience. It's not, I had this one idea and I just went for it and I found success and I never deviated from that. So I think for most entrepreneurs, there is quite a meandering, circulatory type, or just a completely chaotic path that you've gone on, that I've gone on. And it can be hard to not only explain that to someone in the outside, but it can be difficult to kind of retrospectively look back and tease out the why behind what it is that you've done, all of these choices that you've made. Which is why I think that it's a really wonderful thing if you can start especially if you're just starting out in business now, if you can anchor yourself to your why in the beginning, you will be on such solid ground as you continue on your entrepreneurial path. And so I do have to confess that it really wasn't until this past year that I actually sat down with myself and with my business history and really sat down with my journal and just got right into all of this, why? Why am I in business? Why did I become an entrepreneur in the first place? Why have I stayed an entrepreneur for 8 years, even though it took me 8 years to get to a point where I was finally what I would say is conventionally successful and profitable in my business? And why did it take me so long to really dig down into that core? And I have to say, in large part, what prompted this inquiry into why and the things that I come back to time and time again were two resource pieces, one of which was Simon Sinek's TED Talk, which I will link to in the show notes. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it. It's the Start With Why TED Talk, and he also has a book, which I'll link to as well, just Start With Why. And I just thought, I thought that was such a brilliant TED Talk, and the concept, if you haven't seen it, and if you have seen it, it's always a good reminder, is that the leaders and the businesses, the brands that are the most successful are the ones that keep true to the core of their why. And he says that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So people are more attuned to buy into the why behind your business. They don't care as much how you do it or what it is. They care about the why behind it. And that translates into, in marketing terms, that translates into the fact that people are actually more interested in learning the benefits of your product or service over the features. So when you're writing a sales page or you're communicating your message, it's always important to stick the benefits above the features. The features are a supplementary thing. So people aren't necessarily looking out for the features. What they are looking out for is the benefits of something that targets their pain point or helps them at some point in their day or their journey. And so this was, later on in the podcast, we'll sort of dig down deeper into this concept, but just wanted to, as a brief overview, explain how I got to the point where I was really got clear on my why. And one was this TED Talk that was very influential for me, and the other was getting into Danielle LaPorte's Desire Map program, which I am such a huge fan of. I have been such a big fan of her work for years, and actually her program, not the book, but when it was just a program, an online program for Firestarter sessions, I had bought Firestarter sessions maybe 7 years ago. I mean, I don't know exactly the year, but it's a long time. So I bought it maybe 7 years ago, and it was $150, and I literally did not have that to spend. That was way over the budget that I had for my business. It was actually way over the budget that I had for my life right then. So I did not have any expendable income at all. And I knew that entrepreneurship was my path that I wanted to be on. And so I've always operated from this lean startup mentality of just, any way that I can make this happen cheaply and pinch my pennies and find a free or a low cost way to do it, I'm in. And there was one day, I guess it was around Danielle's birthday, and she offered the Firestarter sessions online course for Pay What You Can. And I bought the course for $17, and that was all of the money that I had in my bank account right then. So I cleared myself out to zero because I felt like that program was going to be the catalyst in my business. And it was the catalyst. I mean, it did help me so much to kind of push myself forward. The reason why I see the gap between purchasing and going through that program, and it took me years to finally get to a place of success, was it actually, it took me years personally to understand myself and my temperament, to realize that I was jumping from one shiny idea to the next shiny idea, and I didn't really have a lot of staying power at the time. I didn't have a lot of commitment to seeing things through. And so I see that as a major setback in what took me years to get where I am right now, was lack of consistency. So I had all the tools, I had the knowledge, I'm putting that in practice now. I'm moving from a very actionable place now, in a committed place, in a dedicated place, proactive. But at the time, it was not, that was not part of my vocabulary. I would try something, and I would try it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I would say, nope, doesn't work. Doesn't work for me. I tried to sell it and nobody bought. I tried to run a workshop and 2 people signed up. So rather than going back to the drawing board or tweaking things in the marketing campaign, I would just scrap it. Just, no, it's not working. And I did that for years, jumping around from idea to idea to idea. And this was not helpful in my business. So I'm happy to say that so much of my success right now, I'm grateful, I'm very, very thankful, is coming from raw action, finally putting these pieces, this information that I've been collecting for years, finally putting this information into practice rather than just continuing on the path, that addictive path of jumping onto new ideas, or just constantly being in research mode. I got to a point where I said, I have enough knowledge now. I can do this. Anyway, so Danielle LaPorte's Desire Map book and program really was transformative for me in really dialing into what my why is, not just in business, but in life and in various aspects of my life. So how do I want to feel in my home? How do I want to feel in my body when I exercise? So finding the core value or the core feeling that is really underneath all of these things. And so that gave me the space and the motivation to sit down and say, right, okay, so why am I an entrepreneur? Why am I in business? Why do I do what I do? And some of the answers that came up for me were freedom was really at the core of all of it. The freedom to not feel locked in to any one choice, the freedom to run my day the way that I want to, the freedom to not have a boss, the freedom to change my mind and do my own thing and be independent. And so I've operated my business as a lone wolf, all this time. And I love it. I love waking up in the morning and saying, this day is mine. It's mine to operate in however way that I see fit. And sometimes, and when I work with clients, sometimes, there is a relationship where there's an expectation that I perform certain work that it will be, has a fixed deadline, so this website needs to be built by Friday. But luckily it doesn't infringe very much upon my freedom. And location freedom was very important to me too. I wanted to be able to work from anywhere in the world and take my laptop with me and travel and see the world and have Wi-Fi and just work, from there. So I really dug down into freedom as being that core tenet behind why I'm in business, why I'm an entrepreneur. But then there was another question of what is the why behind my business? And that was a little bit trickier because I had to sit down and think about the linear, create some kind of pattern, some kind of linear pattern or some kind of thread that weaves through all of the disparate businesses that I've started as an entrepreneur. And at the time when I was attempting to make these discoveries or bridge the knowledge gap to find out what was my why in business and what was the why, could I tease out some kind of pattern between all of these different things that I've done? And at the time when I was trying to figure this out, it was the biggest and strangest departure for me in business because everything else kind of made sense in that I was teaching yoga and I was teaching self-empowerment classes and dance and movement, meditation, which kind of led very naturally on to writing about these topics. And I'd say that those were the core, the kind of keys of the better part of my business life, my life as an entrepreneur. But then there was this wild departure of a year or two ago when I started a design studio. And I was sitting there and thinking well, how does this connect? How did I get to be in this place? And I saw that technically I had gotten to be in that place because I bootstrapped my businesses the whole time. So I taught myself everything I needed to know about making logos and doing branding and building websites. And because I was so I was a bit business ADD and I wanted to just keep, creating all these brands, it actually gave me a really rich opportunity to complete the branding process multiple times. I just never got paid for it. I was doing it for my own projects. But when I looked back, when I first started the design work, I looked back and I said, oh my God, I've got a portfolio of 10 or 12 different brands that I've created. They just are all mine. More than half of them, 3/4 of them never saw the light of day because they were either projects I wasn't jazzed about working on, or I just, having deeper thought about it, I didn't think it was going to be a viable product or a viable business. But I loved the branding process, and I loved just the birthing of a raw idea. I'm not someone who really struggles for ideas. I've got loads, always have had loads of ideas and loads of directions that I wanted to go in. I feel like there's a bit of that Gemini spirit of the twins, and that warring perspectives between going in one direction or going in this direction. And I never really consciously saw branding or design as a great direction to go in. I thought that was something that was for other people to do, and Photoshop gurus and expert coders. And what I found is that it was perfect for my personality because I only get to work on projects for short bursts of time. And before the point when I would actually get bored on a project, I've already moved on to something else. So it keeps my mind engaged. It keeps my creativity fresh, and it offers me the opportunity to really sit down and help someone else in the birthing process. So it's almost akin to being a doula or something like that, it was just a career path that I thought about at some point. So I sat down with this design work and this branding work and said, okay, so how does this fit? What is the why that's underneath this? Or what is the thing that I've always been doing? And what actually came up for me was teaching was one of the things that I had always been doing. And I finally really saw myself as a teacher and someone who loves to learn and teach. One of my favorite things is absorbing new information. And as soon as I absorb it, I just want to turn around and just teach the next person that I see. Like, did you know? Here, I'll show you how to do it. And so that's kind of the point that I'm at in business right now is I'm still teaching. It's just that the subject's different. And I'm okay with the fact that I might teach this for a year, I might teach branding for a year, and the next year I might be teaching something completely different. So I really drilled down to the core of who I am, my archetype, which I think is the teacher and the creative catalyst. But I had to go a little bit further into the business that I have right now with my design studio and think like, what is it, why am I doing this work? Because this work isn't necessarily teaching, but there's another layer to it. Like, why am I doing the design work? And what is the bigger why behind like putting together CSS and HTML code and mocking up a logo for someone? And what I came to was this realization that the why behind that is the same of everything that I have ever done in business, which is a desire to help people bring out the best in themselves. It's that desire to be of better and greater service to someone. And I see the website design as not really that different than like having someone come in to the yoga studio or having them come into a burlesque class. I get to peel back the layers, and I get to peel back the armor that they come in with and give them the opportunity to reflect back the beauty that I see in them. And it doesn't matter if it's a website or if it's taking boudoir photographs of someone or having, a one-on-one yoga lesson. For me, it's the same. For me, it is just like that website and what I want to create for someone is an extension of themselves. I want someone to look at that website and say, you know what? I see this and I feel so beautiful. I see this and I feel so proud of myself and my business and I've done it. And just that the sense of joy and accomplishment that can come from, I know it myself from like seeing your website. It just makes you feel like, wow, like this is legit. Like I'm really doing this. And for a lot of female entrepreneurs especially, the website is that barrier between I'm sitting here, I know this is something that I want to do, and there is a barrier between me wanting it and the actual having of it, or the feeling of legitimizing myself as a proper business owner. And for a lot of people, that website can be the catalyst that breaks down the barrier between feeling like a wannabe entrepreneur and like the real deal. Like I'm actually out putting myself out there in the world. And so I wind up birthing quite a lot of websites for people, helping in that quote unquote birthing process. And that's really been all of the, that's been the case for me and lots of the work that I've done as an entrepreneur. I can really like uncover that as a why of my why is helping people to see that better version of themselves. And sometimes it's in pixels, and sometimes it's in words, and sometimes it's through a yoga pose, or sometimes it's sitting in meditation. But they are all connected, Yeah, so sitting down and uncovering that was huge. It was really huge. It put it all in perspective. Now, the reason why I really wanted to start with a personal story about my own why, what that is, and how I came to uncover that, is I just wanted, before I kind of go into the nuts and bolts of how you can find out your why and what questions I think are helpful to ask, just wanted to get that level of groundedness together, because I think it's important to just inspire some deep inquiry. And also, I think it's really, really important as an entrepreneur to help you to avoid burnout and personality fatigue, is to really become very knowledgeable of your why. Because this is going to help you to stop that comparison that it's so easy, such an easy trap to fall into as an entrepreneur, this comparison trap of like, I should be doing that. I have to do that. I'm looking at all of these other entrepreneurs and they're crushing it and they're killing it and they're doing it like this. Therefore, I have to do it like this. Because when you're not anchored to your why, it is really easy to just get swept up in this perspective that that's what you have to do. But actually, when you sit down to your why, for example, like if I saw everyone, okay, so let's say we'll take my old example of being a burlesque teacher, having a burlesque studio. Now, I was a mobile studio, so I didn't have a studio space. When there was a class, I just rented a space, or we went to people's houses. I had 4 or 5 teachers that freelanced for the business. So we would just go where we needed to go. Now, if I was looking around in my industry and I was feeling that comparison urge, I would say, okay, so everyone who is much more successful than I am, they have a studio. They have a place where people can come and it looks great, branding wise, and they have a location. And so I could look at that and say, this is what I should do, in order to be successful. But what I didn't realize at the time was I was unconsciously still operating from my deeper why, which is a desire for freedom. And so that desire for freedom instantaneously knocked out any idea of owning or renting property and being location based. So I was like, no way. Like, have to change it, have to think of another way of doing this, because have to find another way to be successful. That was a non-negotiable for me. I didn't want to have a space that kept me location tied, that when I got the inevitable buzz where I knew that it was time to travel and time to explore different pastures, I wouldn't have to dismantle an entire business. So that has really been a driver of making almost every business decision that I've made since. So when you are operating from that deep sense of knowing your why, you will get to a point where those comparison questions won't be as important, because you will judge them against your why. And so if your why is to be able to spend more time with your family, say, or work from home so you can stay home and raise your kids, then you're not going to look at someone else's comparison of, I don't know, look, they build their business because they do all these speaking engagements and they speak at all these conferences. You measure that up against your why and you say, well, that's not the way that I want to do it, because I want to be home with my family. If I was doing 30 speaking engagements in a year, then I would be away from home like 30 weeks of the year. So I think having this knowledge of the why it can help you be the driver of every single decision that you make in your business. It really is that big that you can keep coming back to your why and saying, okay, does this match up with our why? And your why can change throughout the years or throughout the months, It's not fixed. It's not static. It is a dynamic being. And yeah, I just love this topic so much because I think it's so rich, and it really it can add so much perspective to everything else that you do in business. I have my why, and I go back to that why constantly to even ask questions about like, which social media platform do I want to be on? Which allows me the best opportunity to teach, the best opportunity to express myself. How can I better serve my clients? Is this expansion, does this expansion make sense in comparison, in connection to my why? All of these things, so that sense of lightness and freedom, which typifies my why, it might be very, very different to yours. And that is going to be the thing that will lead you into making the decisions about everything, getting to the bottom of it. So why are you in business? And also, what's the why behind all of your products? What's the why behind all of the content that you create? Do you create just because? Do you create because you saw that, everyone else is blogging, therefore I should have a blog? I certainly have fallen into that trap in the past, and even the very recent past too, where I started blogging for a new iteration of my business. And I sat down with myself and I said, does this fit? No, it doesn't fit. It's not the place where I'm going to be getting the most traffic. It takes a lot of my time. And it wasn't something that was lighting me up. So I said, okay, switching gears. Going to start a podcast instead. I missed using my voice. I missed connecting in this more intimate way. And blogging used to be that years ago, but it's not the case anymore. It's really difficult to start a blog with a massive following and deep connections with people. Podcasting offers a much more intimate perspective, a much more intimate way of communicating. And the webinars, which I've been doing, that's a similar thing, So I had to match that up with my why behind everything, and said, is this a choice that I want to continue with? No. Okay. Scrap the blog then. Scrap anything that I feel like is not providing the best output, and it's taking up a lot of my time and resources, and I chose to put those resources somewhere else. So that TED Talk that I was telling you about, Simon's TED Talk, Start With Why, I just wanted to read you a little quote from it that I think is pretty cool and apt. He says, "Success in business doesn't happen when you find the things that are wrong and try to fix them. Success happens when you find the things that are right and amplify them." And I think that's awesome. I think it's so awesome. It was, just really getting into that, like that why and what you are good at in business, and just shining like the flashlight on it and just making a commitment to making that better. So when I realized that teaching was the way that I was connecting through all of my businesses, and I looked at what I was doing and I said, right, what am I doing on a day-to-day? Okay, I'm making websites. Am I teaching? No, I'm not. Should I be teaching? Yes. And I made strategic choices to, whether it was through building an online course, teaching webinars, or even teaching in a different way in the podcast, I need to make sure that teaching is back at the forefront of what it is that I do. But yeah, I love that quote. Yeah, success happens when you find the things that are right and amplify them. That is so cool. So how do you get to your why? Like, what is your why and how are you fulfilling it in business? I think there's a few questions that you can ask yourself that will help you get into this inquiry point quicker. I think in asking the questions, for me, the most natural place to start is to ask, why are you in business? Why are you trying to be an entrepreneur? Because you know it, I know it, it ain't easy. It's like, it can be one of the hardest, most vulnerable things that you could potentially do in life. It's triggering in a lot of different ways, but I find it ultimately rewarding. I wouldn't change it for the world, but we have to be honest and say that this is not an easy path to choose to go down. And even the people that from the outside, it looks like it is this amazing success story and they've made, 6 or 7 figures in their business or even more, maybe they have some kind of tech company that has an IPO and they've sold it and it, made $1 million, millions of dollars in acquisition of the business. If you just scratch the surface ever so slightly, you will find that there are quite a lot of stories under the surface of hardship and vulnerability, discomfort, sacrifices that have been made. So I think starting off, getting to this point of, uncovering a word or 2 words, 2 or 3 words that describe why it is that you are actually an entrepreneur. What is the thing underneath of all of these things as the driver for you to continue doing this? Like, why do you continue, trying to make your website or posting on social media or blogging or creating a new service or working with clients? What is that deeper why? So once you get to that point and you know that answer, then you can start digging down a bit further into your products and services that you're creating. And what is the why behind? There can be multiple whys. There can be an overarching why of your business itself. And then there can be a sort of mini whys that go along with each. If you have multiple products that you're selling or multiple services or multiple packages, even if you service different kinds of customers, there can be a why behind all of those too. So I would just take a bird's eye view of your business and say, what is the why, overarching why of your business? And then if you want, you can kind of drill down a bit deeper into each one. And if you're maybe struggling to find that why or to uncover it, just have a few questions, that you can ask yourself. One is, what am I passionate about? So what are you passionate about? And how is that passion reflected in your business, your products and services? And an important thing to realize here is if the answer is that you can't really see how that's reflected in your products or services or your business, then that is a really great marker. It's like, underline it 3 times or something. That is a great marker, a reminder to go back to that, because this is the place where you want to inject more passion into your products and services. So make a note of that and I think all of us could do more in that respect too. There's always a place of infusing more passion and personality into the work that we do. So the other question that I would ask you is, how do you feel compelled? How are you drawn to work with a population that you'd like to serve? So in which ways do you want to be helpful? How do you want to be helpful? And knowing how you'd like to be helpful, that can be another catalyst in finding out your why. So this place, the next step, the kind of next linear step after your why, is getting to a point where you know your USP, which is your unique selling proposition. And that is kind of this combination between your big why, your passion and your skill, so what you are the best at, and where that meets the greatest need of your population. So that greatest need could be like it can be a pain point, it can be a desire. It's just that intersection. If you imagine it as like a Venn diagram, the USP is like what would be in the center of your why, your skills, and the greatest need. And in another podcast, or maybe you'll check me out on a webinar or something, we'll definitely dive deeper into USP and how you can find that out. And I think once you have good knowledge, a good working knowledge of your why and the why behind your entire business and even the why behind your specific products, services, offerings, tape it up on the wall, get it up there, get it in a place where you can see it every day, get it in a place where you can remind yourself when you are struggling and when you do have those days where being an entrepreneur just sounds like fucking bullshit, like it is just too hard and you're ready to just throw in the towel. You're going to need this why. You're going to need this thing that you can anchor yourself to and you can come back to remind yourself of why you are in business. So whenever I feel like throwing in the towel, I remind myself, my why is in business is to be free. And right now, I am free. I live abroad in a beautiful country. I work on my laptop and I can go to the beach in the afternoon if I like to. I get to teach people. I get to teach what I know. I get to spread the enthusiasm and the inspiration that I feel about life and so many different subjects. And the internet is, as much as it frustrates me sometimes, the internet is the main piece of useful technology that allows me to share this with anyone in the world. And I think that is just so friggin' awesome. And that's what I remind myself whenever I get to a place of discomfort with the work that I'm doing. So I really hope that this podcast episode has been a big inspiration for you to sit down and really become intimate with your why. And if you already know your why, I hope it's inspired you to put it in a place where you see it and create some kind of ritual that does remind you. I recommend, it's really a cornerstone practice of mine, of coming back yearly, monthly, weekly, even daily. I actually do this daily, just a daily inquiry where I revisit my why and I uncover the deeper truth of how I want to feel in business, how I want to feel in my day. So I have a daily journaling practice of in the morning when I wake up, I sit down and I write out my core desired feelings, which is a practice that I got from Danielle LaPorte's The Desire Map. And my core desired feelings, they pertain to how I want to feel in business and in my day. So they shift from day to day. They're not always the same, but it gives me a great opportunity to say, okay, this is my priority. This is how I'd like to feel today. And then I also do a list of my top priorities for the day. So things that I would really like to get done and things that will make my life feel better. And that when I get in bed at night, I will feel like, yes, I've accomplished this. So it's been really awesome talking about this. Let's make it a two-way conversation. And if you have anything to add, you can definitely email me at spiritedentrepreneur@gmail.com, or you can find me at Twitter at Hey Nicole Harlow. And Don't forget that there's a thriving digital community aspect of this podcast. It's over on Facebook. It's a place for you to meet other spirited entrepreneurs, find an accountability partner, get inspired, and share your business. But you have to get an invitation because it is a private group. So if you go over to thesepod.com, you'll see a place where you can sign up with your name and your email address, and I will send you out an invitation to join us in that group. If you're loving this podcast, please consider subscribing, sending it to a friend, especially if you have a friend who is a fellow entrepreneur or someone who is, just starting a business or thinking about starting a business and could really benefit from listening in on these conversations. Definitely subscribe, leave a review if you feel called to leave a review. And you can find any additional instructions about how to subscribe, leave a review, plus things like show notes, how to submit a question, recommend a guest, or contact me at thesepod.com. Like I said before, you can find me on Twitter at HeyNicoleHarlow. And one last thing, the Spirited Entrepreneur podcast is sponsored by the folks over at Audible. They've been really generous and have offered an audiobook of your choice completely free to all listeners of the show. A book that I think ties in so beautifully with everything that we were just talking about is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. So you can kind of get to that point of really uncovering the why in business and the why you are an entrepreneur and why you do what you do. And Simon is really good at translating this in easy, familiar terms of how once you've found your why, how that can translate in your business and how you can communicate that to your potential customers and clients. Like we were talking about in the very beginning, where it's not about how or what you do, it's about why you do it. And when it comes to products and services, it's about benefits over features. So to download your free copy of Start With Why today, go to audibletrial.com/spirited. Again, that is audibletrial.com/spirited. And you can download Start With Why or choose from one of the 180,000 titles that are available over on their website. This is Nicole Harlow, and you've been listening to the Spirited Entrepreneur podcast. Until next time, have a great day. Bye.